So thank you guys so much for being here tonight. A few things before we get started. Some of you, if you're already in the industry or if you've been playing around with Git on the side, you might already have all of this, but before we get started, and so the hands-on activities, these are some of the things you're going to need. So your computer already comes with a command line, that second bullet point there. Windows should come with PowerShell, Mac should come with Terminal. If you need help opening those up, we have volunteers in the audience helping you with that. So that's one of the things we're going to need tonight. The second thing is a GitHub account. Raise your hand if you do not have a GitHub account right now. 1, 2, all right, so go to github.com. There's a link in the, I believe, top right corner for creating an account. Go ahead and get started with that right now as well. And then that first thing I set up here, your local Git installation, you're gonna need that. So git-scm.com, that's where you can actually download Git. If you've used Git on your laptop before, you probably already have it, probably don't remember installing it. I know I didn't when I went to make this slide. I was like, I installed Git like a million years ago. What did I actually do to do that? And I had to go retrace my steps. So you gotta go to git-scm.com, download that. Your command line you should already have. And then a GitHub account. So go ahead and get started on that. Also, it'll help if you join us on Slack. I'm going to pass out links at the end of this event. So before you leave, join us on Slack. You can grab me, Claire, or another volunteer for that. All we need is your email address. Any questions about all of that?
We have those of you who volunteered to be volunteers tonight. Please stand up so everyone else knows who to look for. Lou, I'm looking at you, I know. We've got some Git experts, so flag us down at any time. I'm not an expert. But yeah, if you need help with any of this along the way, Lou, call Lou first, and then me second.
Yeah, please raise your hand, flag us down. This stuff's weird. There's little weird nuances, and if your computer acts funny or acts funny, you get a weird message. Things happen, so just raise your hand. We want to get through that really quickly so we can start with the hands-on. Start with the hands-on learning that I planned for us. But before that, I wanted to go over some of the fundamentals of Git, and I want to tell you a little bit about myself as well, like Claire mentioned. So my name is Caree Youngman. I'm an engineering manager at Creative Market right now. I started coding maybe when I was 11. That's the first time I remember writing some HTML and CSS. Large part of my generation just messed around with MySpace layouts, and I think the first website I made was a tribute to My Chemical Romance, if you remember that band. And so that's when I started coding, right? And I didn't know it was called front-end development at the time, but later I realized, oh, that's a job title. Like, someone will pay me to do that. Not make My Chemical Romance fan pages, but other stuff in HTML and CSS. So that's where I started. I got a little older and I dropped out of college because I was a cool kid. I didn't want to go to school. And I retaught myself front-end development. It was called front-end development by then. So I took some Treehouse courses, some YouTube courses, and taught myself to code and took on freelancing jobs. And then I moved to Dallas in 2015, began to work full-time in software development, front-end development specifically. And that leads me to here. Now I'm an engineering manager at Creative Market, director of Women Who Code DFW, full-time student. During the day, I do manager stuff. Ask me what that is if you think it's interesting. It's not, but basically I manage a really awesome team of software engineers at Creative Market. And then I have several side projects and freelance work, things like that, just to keep my hand in code. I think I'll always kind of want to be a developer, even though I've stepped away as a manager. And so that's what brought me here today. I wanted to give a workshop. The future. So this is still internal, but I have a new title called UI UX Engineering Manager over at Creative Market. It's not official yet, but soon to be. That means I'll be really involved in design systems and user testing. I'm so into that. I'm so into the aspect of software that touches the user directly, in the way we can in the way that we can scale design systems to really make it maintainable. And I like to mentor others, speak at events, write more, and maybe I'll finish my portfolio in 2019. Don't go to my website. I know I linked to it. Don't go. And then what I'm passionate about, creating great user experience, bringing beautiful design to life using code, front-end development, obviously, creating opportunities for others, helping people reach their potential, building teams, and learning and growing every day. And that's why I'm here. You can connect with me at Caree Codes on Twitter, Instagram, and almost anywhere else. That's my website. Don't go to it. That's my blog. Go to it, I guess. And then reach out to me on the Women Who Code DFW Slack after this. Am I talking too much?
No. Killing it.
have Claire in the audience.
You want me to leave?
So, the title on this meetup was Intro to Git and Github at one point. And then I changed it because my friend refused to come here unless I renamed it to Get It Girl. So you're welcome, Lauren. But this is what I wanted to call it. I hate Git. Because I hate Git. Remember that job I told you about when I moved to DFW and I started as a front-end engineer? Yeah, I hadn't done a lot of Git at that point. I'd done a lot of solo projects. I'd done a lot of projects with 1 or 2 developers, and we kept our source code in Dropbox, believe it or not. Yeah, it was bad. So I never had the need or the desire to really learn much about Git. I knew it was important. I knew it was this thing that you needed if you wanted to get a job, right? I knew, like, you want to show employers, like, hey, I've done stuff. Supposedly you needed to have commits on your GitHub that are public, things like that. And so that's all I really knew about it at the time. These were my first GitHub repositories at my first job. It was terrible. I found ways to mangle branches in ways like my senior architect had never quite seen before. So I'd raise my hand and say, I need help. I don't know how to commit my changes. He would come over and say, I don't know what you did, but you're going to have to start over because we're going to reclone your branch, etc. And yeah, I don't quite know how you mess this up, Carrie. So I was terrible. I was terrible at it. The thing that they didn't tell me at the time was that a lot of people are actually kind of bad at Git. It's a lot of Googling. It's a lot of, you ask how to do something, and depending on who you ask, you get a different answer. And they're all correct answers, right? How do I commit something? How do I branch out? How do I resolve this? There are multiple different commands. There are multiple different commands, and there are multiple different ways. And a lot of the time, you're trying to debug something in Git. You don't understand what you did. And this is actually a solution that I was given by my senior architect. I don't know what you broke. Just reclone, copy it over, and commit, I guess. So yeah, as a junior, that was very confusing to me. I wish someone had slowed me down and said, hey, save and push your remote branch often, first of all. Keep it simple, and consult your rubber duck when needed, and that's why you all have rubber ducks today, because you're going to need it. And then Google stuff if you need to, and ask for help, because no one really knows exactly what they're doing with Git, and when you need help, ask. So yeah. My goal for this workshop is not to teach you everything about Git, it's to teach you all of the fundamentals that you would need walking into a software development job. So the day-to-day stuff, making local changes, pushing to your remote repository, all of that you kind of need to just get your work done and out the door. And what's the difference between Git and GitHub? That's often a question I get asked. How are we doing on downloading all that stuff, by the way? Good. Is anyone stuck?
I am.
What are you stuck on?
My fabulous Mac is locked in the down. The installation of the install.
Okay.
I'm not familiar with Mac. Are you familiar with Mac? Yes. What?
Can we get a volunteer right here to help with the Mac issue on Git? Awesome. So if anyone else gets stuck, just feel free to raise your hand. I'm going to move on a little bit, but all these slides are available online. You're not going to get lost. We'll go back and kind of talk over this whenever we're doing the hands-on. So one of the first questions a lot of people have is what's the difference between Git and GitHub, right? Often you need both, right? You hear you can't have GitHub without Git, and some people are a little bit confused. So the difference is, put simply, Git is the version control system. So it's that actual tool that controls the flow, the changes in your software and your source code. GitHub is a hosting service for Git repositories. So GitHub's a website, right? They have servers where you can actually host your GitHub repository. Git is the version control system that enables that to be possible. Does that make sense? Version control systems are a category of software tools that help a software team manage changes to source code over time. So you think about it, you pull down a project, you make some code changes, you're ready to save that, maybe deploy. If you've only worked on solo projects before, maybe you've never used Git before and had to collaborate with other people. But the thing is, when you pull down a repository, make changes to your code, you need a way to communicate those changes to your teammate who's in the desk next to you, who might be working on the same code as you. So version control enables that to be possible. And I'll kind of show you how, if that's not making sense right now, I think it will. Version control is helpful for collaboration. It's a source of truth and record. So if multiple people are making changes on the same project at the same time, you need a way to know what is the source of truth. What is the, it's called a master branch. What is the version of source code that we're going to go by? And how do we get your changes into that version? Maintaining multiple versions of the same software, so I know like you get software updates probably on your laptop, maybe apps that you have downloaded and things like that. A lot of companies actually maintain multiple versions of the same software. So you have version 1, 2, 3. Claire knows all about that. She loves it. Maintaining multiple versions. So that's another thing that version control is good for. Almost all software companies use a form of version control, and the ones who don't probably should. Like I said, that company that I was working for that had their source code in Dropbox, not a good idea for several reasons that we'll get into. There are several different version control systems, but Git is the most popular one. That's why we're focusing on it today. There's also SVN. There's also one called Mercurial that I've never used. I don't know much about. But Git is by and large the most popular system. There are a lot of ways to interact with the version control system, but a universal method that you'll encounter at most companies is a command line. So that's what we're going to work on today. There's also GUIs. Source Tree is one. Git Kraken is another. Those are like visual interfaces. So if you don't like interacting with the command line, if you want something a little more visual, you can download one of those. Today we're going to focus on the command line. How's the download going? Awesome. Cool. All right. So vocab time. I don't want to overload you with vocabulary words, but there are some things you need to know if you've never interacted with Git before. The first is repository. I think I've said that several times already. A repository is basically a bucket where your source code lives. Think of it as a file. You take a file and you put, a folder, and you put several files in it. That file is your repository. Git repositories contain all of your source code, plus the history of source code. So it's not enough to say that a repository is a folder containing all of your source code. It actually has a .git file in it that maintains a record of all of the changes you make. So all of the commits that you make, who made them, when they happened, things like that are also contained in your Git repository. Another word you need to know is branch. A branch is essentially an independent line of development, or branch of development. You can take advantage of branching when working on new features or bug fixes because it isolates your work from the other team. So if you have a master branch and you branch off of that and create your own branch, then that separates your work from the work the rest of the team is doing. I don't feel like that makes sense just yet, does it? Raise your hand if that did make sense. Okay, half and half. I think it'll make more sense when we do the hands-on. So for a visual, every color here represents branches. So we have a green branch, a blue branch, and a purple branch. Every circle on there contains commits all along the way. So if you think of this chronologically, this is your initial commit. Maybe you made another commit. And then right here, we branched off. So now you see we have a purple branch and a master branch, which is the blue branch. And we make commits there along the way as well. And then here over here on the green is another branch with multiple commits. Sorry, you can't picture.
No, you naturally.
Okay, finally, let's learn some commands. So let's learn actually what we're going to need in order to interact with this. So git and init. Git and init creates a new local repository. Git clone. Git clone actually creates a copy of a remote repository on your local computer. So it's kind of like a download. When you go to a website, you download a file. It's kind of like that. You're downloading a repository to your local computer so you have a copy of that on your machine. Git status tells you what files have changed, files you still need to add to commit, add to staging, and commit. So basically when you run a git status, it says, hey, by the way, you made a change in this file. Do you want to save that? Do you want to commit that and push that to the remote repository? That's what git status does. And we'll demonstrate that later. Git checkout changes you from one branch to another. So let's imagine that you're living on master branch on that diagram that I showed you earlier. If you want to check out the blue branch next to it, you would say something like git checkout blue branch. And finally, git pull. Pulls changes from the remote repository into your local repository. So let's say that you have your remote repository and that has your source code. You've copied that to your machine, you're making changes on it, but someone else also copied it to their machine. They're making changes too, and they push those changes back to your remote repository. How do you get those into your copy of the source code so that you have the same copy that they do? You do that by doing a git pull. Git add. Git add stages changes to be committed. So if you run a git add, some file.jpg or something like that, it's going to add that to staging. Staging is an area that prepares your files to be committed. Yeah. Staging is basically a holding area where you put files that you want to commit. So an example of that, if you wanted to do an individual file, would be git add myfilename.js. That would just add one file to staging. If you wanted to add all of your things, so let's say you changed multiple files, you do git add dot. I know there's multiple ways to do it, but this one's my favorite. And it would add all of your changed files to staging. Git commit. So git commit creates a commit and saves it to your repository. You have to add your changes to staging before you can commit, and you must include a commit message when committing changes. So all that to say, you're going to run a git add, you're going to say git add these files to staging. Now they're in staging. There's one more step before you can push it to your remote repository, which is a git commit. This is the basic syntax, git commit -m. Says, this is my commit message. If you go to GitHub right now and click on a repository of an open source project, you'll see a lot of different commit messages. They're basically a way for developers to communicate. I wish I hadn't put this part in here, but now I have to say it.
You did.
So one of my favorite Twitter accounts actually is a robot built by someone at Microsoft called Developer Swearing. And it scans GitHub for every single Git commit in which the developer uses a swear word. So commit messages are used to communicate, to ask questions, to celebrate project milestones, as you can see, to give a colleague constructive feedback, my favorite. These are all terrible ways to use a Git commit message, so I just included these as a poor example. What you really want your commit messages to be are descriptive and well formatted, so that someone else coming after you can kind of read what you did. You made changes to a file, now you're committing it to the remote repository. You might even come back a year later and want to know, what did I do? And you don't remember. If you've done some coding classes, you probably know all about code comments, right? Comments are things you write in your code to remind you, oh yeah, this is what I meant when I wrote this. This was the intention behind this is how this works. Commit messages are very similar. So you need those to communicate something meaningful to the audience, even if that audience is only yourself. Sometimes teams and companies have guidelines on how to format commit messages. Sometimes they'll have ticket numbers or issue numbers that you need to put in your commit messages as well. So when you start the company, that will be part of their procedure. Any questions so far? No. It's so quiet. All right, and then I think this is the last one, git push. And I know this is a lot of information. You don't need to memorize this. Git push pushes your local repository changes to your remote repository. You have to commit your changes before you can push. So to step back a little bit, the first thing I said was git add, right? We run git add and we add the changed file to staging. The next thing was git commit, right? Git commit /m, and then in quotes you're going to say your commit message, and it's going to describe the thing that you changed. The last thing you need to do in order to get that code from your computer to the remote repository is a git push. I feel like we just did git branch. Git branch basically creates a new branch. So if you run git branch /new branch name, you've now created a new branch on your local repository. If you'd like to check that out, you can also run git checkout -b and then your branch name. Okay. Now on to the hands-on. Are y'all ready? Yep. This is a lot. Okay. Does everyone have their stuff downloaded and ready to go? Okay. And to recap, we needed that command line tool, a GitHub account, and then we needed git install locally. Okay. Raise your hand if you need any help. We've got volunteers in the audience.